Welcome to Chaos, Logos, Order, where we apply the ideas of Jordan Peterson in order to create lives of increasingly heroic meaning. With our hosts, Guy Sengstock of thecirclinginstitute.com and Mark Michael Lewis, that's me, from the game of heroicmeaning.com. We're going through Jordan Peterson's new book, Beyond Order, chapter by chapter. In this episode, we go through Chapter 4, Notice that Opportunity Lurks Where Responsibility Has Been Abdicated. So welcome, sir.
Welcome.
Mr. Sengstock. Absolute pleasure to see you.
Mr. Lewis. Mr. Mark Michael Lewis.
Why, thank you.
Yes.
Yes. So, Chapter 4.
Mm-hmm. Chapter 4.
Right? Opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated.
Yes.
Notice this.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
So one of the questions he asks is, if you notice that something isn't being handled, it's not being taken care of, why do you notice that?
Right.
Of all the things that happen in the world, right? Existence is happening and then you're making sense of it and then you live in the existential experience of your interpretation of what's happening. Like, if you notice that something isn't being done, where you notice that responsibility is being abdicated, you're probably going to experience that as grumble, anger, frustration, finger pointing. But when you notice that, why do you notice that? Right?
Yes.
And as I like to say, I think he says something really similar at some point. He says, responsibility is making it your problem.
Right. Right.
Responsibility is saying, that's my problem.
Yes.
And here he's saying, if you notice that something is not right, according to your judgment, if you notice that, why do you notice that? Perhaps it's because it's your problem to take responsibility for.
Yes. 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 By the way, this very thing that we're talking about is this is been incredibly useful for getting Guy, who has been notoriously messy most of his life, to be actually a phenomenological house cleaner.
Oh, phenomenological house cleaning.
Yes, because what you do is you look at a corner and then you just feel. And then you just, based on that feeling, then you go, it tells you, like the corner tells you what's off, that you can notice it. And then you adjust a book and you put things like that and you stand back and there's a different feeling, right? And it tells you more. And if you just do that, every part of your house, the house will tell you exactly what to do to clean it up. So there's this, what I think the distinction here too is it's responsibility, the ability to respond, but also the will to respond. Right?
How do you mean?
Well, it says right here, I think this is my favorite part of this whole chapter. So he's talking about Horace. More importantly, however, Horace has the will to see along with the ability, right? So it's not just seeing it, right? But it's being willing. I think there's willing to see and willing to respond, right? The will to see it, the will to respond it. And then um, instead of willful blindness, right? It's willful sight, if you will. Yes. And this has just been crucial, I think, this has just been crucial for my own personal life, right? So like many people, I had a midlife crisis. I had pretty much lost everything. And I figured out what all you needed to do to lose everything is basically not do anything. If you just sit there, it doesn't take much work. It's like if you just sit there and you don't open your mail, right? And you don't respond to any of the things, your whole life will just kind of disintegrate. Mm-hmm. And
the fog will get you.
And it gave me a big restart, right? And the restart was, so much of it was about precisely beginning to respond to the things that I had not responded to over the course of that year, right? This is right after a divorce and all that kind of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And the initial inertia, right, was such a contention, right? However, I have to say, it's interesting. The inertia doesn't let you know how quickly you can receive dopamine, right? The point between the inertia and how it feels like to pay that bill or to call that, like the IRS or whatever it is, that finally confront the issue and respond to it, feels like, okay, I'm going to call and it's going to be, and I'm just going to keep feeling this way and it'll just keep feeling like this forever. But then the moment you call and you get done, there's this feedback loop, right? Which is very restorative, right? Which allows you to want to do it again, right? So this is one of the things about this that I've noticed, that this distance between this taking responsibility and the dread of it that comes up with it, especially if you put something off for a long time, right? That the dread seems to have a foreverness. It'll be awful. However, one step in the positive direction, there is an immediate response. It doesn't solve the whole problem because there's usually lots of steps, but that one, it's like what the dread doesn't reveal is that if you take that one step, it'll feel different, right? And this is, I think, essentially so much of what he's talking about here. Yes.
Oh, yes. Because he spends a fair amount of time differentiating meaning from happiness.
Yep.
Right. Now, as you know, I'm fond of triads rather than dichotomies.
Yes.
Right. So do you want happiness or do you want meaning? Now, I think that's a false dichotomy. I think you want joy or pleasure, and you want purpose and meaning, and you want prosperity.
Yes.
This three thing. But if you seek happiness, he says, that's the now. The way he defines it, like happiness is in the now. I feel good now, and that brings my attention to the now, and so I'm less likely to think about the future.
Yes.
No meaning, no future to move towards. But as soon as you turn towards making things better, then instead of feeling happiness, what you feel is hope and dopamine.
Yeah.
You have a sense that you're on track, that you're on purpose.
Yeah.
There's a goal.
Sense.
And you are moving towards the goal. And that's sustainable because you can always have a goal and you can always be moving towards it.
Yeah.
And that is sustainable. He says happiness is not sustainable. And the way he describes it, I completely agree.
Yep.
But once you choose a goal and you're moving towards the goal, once you, as you put it, are willing, you are not only able to see, but you're willing to see
Yes.
what is good.
Yes.
And then you take responsibility for it. You notice that it's not being handled, or it has not been handled. And you make it your problem. You make it your goal. And then every step towards that, as you win.
Yes.
You get the dopamine hit. You get the win. And I really love how you, like, it's like you don't have the goal. You're avoiding it. It's in the fog.
Yeah. Yep.
You feel disappointed, right? Or you feel pain, like something's wrong. It's not being handled. Right? Again, forget the quote. But as soon as you set the goal, I'm going to handle this thing, and you take a single step forward, like you said, the inertia, the disappointment, the pain and suffering doesn't let you know, really only one step in that direction will make you start feeling better.
Yeah.
You can actually get momentum with a single step in that direction.
Yeah. Yes. In fact, I'd never quite heard it in the way that you just mentioned it. In the word, you said, turn towards it.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, accounts for what we're talking about. It's not just I'm performing a behavior, but in performing the behavior, it's a modal switch of a turning toward. And I think there's ways in which you could say, I do that with my whole being in some regard, right? And then watching yourself take an action, right, that moves towards the goal. And one of the things that we've been talking about this for years, is this, what you often say is like the moment I want something other than what's right here is the moment that everything shows up is in the way of that. Right?
Yeah, so it's like create obstacles. Yes.
Yes, exactly. And it's so interesting because this distinction between an obstacle and a barrier, right, seems to be about this modal.
And what's the difference between an obstacle and a barrier?
Well, I think it has to do. Well, it's a perspective shift, essentially. But I think the one original thought I've ever had, I'm not saying it's I'm the only one that had it, but it's the only one that I remember ever having. is if you take a piece of paper and you draw a line down the center, and we ask, okay, so when I put a line right down the center, what did that do in relationship to the two sides? And most people say it separates them.
Mm-hmm.
But we could also say that it demarcates the point of connection.
Mm-hmm.
And that essentially, and I think this is what we do in coaching, right? On some level, usually by the time somebody comes and starts working with us, like they have had barriers or goals, and then they hit the line, right? And it always becomes a point of a separation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's, through the coaching, we help them have facilitated transformation in their relationship to that barrier, and see it as an obstacle. Because then what ends up happening as you overcome those barriers, right, and go through the obstacles, you look back, and afterwards what you say is, that's the path. Right?
Yes.
It's simply they're indistinguishable from, it's the path, and the obstacles and the barriers are indistinguishable from each other.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So this orientation, there's a lot going on here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to feed that back to you, see if I've got it, because I like how you brought all that together. So you set a goal, something different than it is now, Again, Jordan says the simplest story is that there is better than here.
Yep.
So I want to get from here to there, and I encounter obstacles on the way. You notice all the obstacles in between here and there. Now, are those obstacles a barrier? Or are they the steps that you need to take on the path to get from here to there?
Yep.
Same challenge. I need to do this thing. I need to call the people. I need to build the thing. I need whatever the thing is that's not yet done that you want to do is either a barrier or an obstacle to be overcome such that it becomes part of the path that got you from here to there.
Yes.
And there's something about how you orient towards it, how you turn towards it.
That turning toward,
right. And to say, and again, notice that opportunities exist where responsibility has been abdicated. So this turning towards, this orientation towards the goal, there's something about saying, I have the ability to respond to the thing, to the challenge, when I say I will respond to that thing, I will figure it out.
Right.
That orientation changes it from a barrier to an obstacle, to something that I need to learn, to something that I need to overcome, such that I'm the kind of person who goes from here to there.
Yes.
Something like that. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that, like, you're, in some sense, this is what's great about articulating your goals, right? Or desired outcomes, or the telos, right? Is that when you, and this is what I appreciate about this difference between happiness, right, and satisfaction, essentially, right, is it really does transform. Literally, it transforms. I think we talked about this in a while back. The moment as a teenager when I was lifting weights, the moment I associated the burn, right, with the bicep that I saw in the mirror that wasn't there the time before, the moment that happened, it literally transformed the meaning of that pain. And it became something I craved instead of something I dreaded, right? So there's and then there was also this kind of sense in which I know that Peterson has talked a lot about on his other videos in some of his courses when he was teaching, that essentially that he thought that the behaviorists didn't conceptualize it right, because they thought that, like, when you move towards something difficult, right, that it becomes easier. And he's talking about this in terms of phobia, right? Like getting over phobia, is that if you consciously move towards it, right, they notice that you end up not being as phobic on whatever it was if you deliberately move towards the thing that you were scared of. And that the behaviorists always talked about that as that you learned how to feel less anxiety, I think, or something like that. Like you learned how to, like, tolerate the anxiety or feel less anxiety. And I think Jordan said that no, he thinks that they conceptualize that wrong. That it's actually is that you see yourself as someone who voluntarily does something difficult for something greater than yourself. And that when you see that, that's a shift in character. That's a transformation in who you are. And so you see yourself as somebody who is heroic, who has courage. You don't, like, learn how to not feel the anxiety. No, you become someone such that who is courageous, right? Yeah, that sense of it.
Yeah. So, and again, this brings back Vervaeke and the agent arena coupling or the agent arena adventure coupling.
Yeah.
That when you take responsibility for the thing that has not been taken responsibility for, when you make the problem your problem, then you focus on it, then you can do this shift where the obstacle is not a barrier that stops you. Like, who am I? I'm an agent that is stopped by a barrier. I'm a young boy who is stopped by the pain of working out. When you take responsibility for it, it stops, you change your character, the agent that you are. You're now, it's not that anxiety goes away, it's that you add courage to the equation. You're now someone who you're now someone who owns that pain. The burn of pushing your muscle to its absolute limit. You're someone who claims that, and therefore that barrier becomes not only an obstacle, you turn your stumbling blocks into stepping stones. Right? Or the problem becomes the solution. Right. The problem is not that your arms burn or your muscles burn when you work them. Right. That's the point. That's the path. And there's something about this orientation towards it, taking responsibility for it, making the problem your problem.
Right.
Something.
And there's also, it's something like that. And there's something about this shift, right? Horace has the will to see along with the ability to see, right? The will to see. There's something so rich about that distinction. Because I mean, everyone can relate to this. Everyone knows they can look in their life and you should eat better. You know that you should get in better shape. You know all of these kinds of things. However, your will to respond to what you know and to what you see is there's a mystery in there. That's crucial. And and tell me what you think about this, because there's another thing that I've thought about this is there's something about the non-localness of it, or the global nature that can happen in just the simple turning towards a goal, right? And hitting an impasse and moving towards it, right? And overcoming it, right? In service of that goal. That it's similar to this experience, and what I mean by it's not local, not just local, is that same experience of when people fall in love, right? They get into a relationship, they fall in love. And they're in that phase of that euphoria of the love. And during that time, their heart opens every time they see this new love in their life. But also, they notice even the neighbor is more beautiful. And during that time, the sunset is more spectacular, right? And even your mother you're less irritated by the thing when your mother does that thing, right?
Yeah.
Right. So there's this level, there's a place in one's heart that feels like an artery, right? That if I open at one place, right, it's not just there, but it opens everywhere, right? I receive blood everywhere in my body, right? Even if the artery opens in one small place, it can be global. And I also think the reverse is true. I've noticed is when people have a resentment, or there's some relationship, right, that they're contracted around, right, that they close off to somebody and they start tolerating it, right? During that time, it's I have a feeling that the sunset isn't as bright, right? Your mother's more irritating when she says that thing. that it's also contractions, right? The heart closing is also a global thing, right? So I think I want to kind of tease out about this connection of how these taking responsibility in one's life, right? And really confronting these things in your lives and taking responsibility for it. That when you just do this, and he's talking about he's very precise in this sense, like pick a dragon that you know that you could actually kill.
Yes.
Right?
It might not have as much treasure as a big dragon. It might be a little dragon, but you can do it.
Yes. And there's wisdom in that, because it seems inherent that if you just start from where you are locally, that just doing that has this quality of it feels like, you turn towards it, but that turn can happen everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. And you can start to pick up momentum, and you start to it becomes autopoetic or takes on a life of its own in a good way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so again, I'm going to feed it back to you and attempt to integrate things and
please
play with this. Okay, so
please.
In Maps of Meaning, especially, Peterson talks about how you have a story that completing that story is actually a step in a larger story. Which is part of a larger story, which is part of a larger story. Right? It's like, I want to finish the project so that I can spend time with my family, so that I can be a father, so that I can be a good person. Right? So that I can live a great life. Like the story within the story within the story. So let's call that local and global.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Okay, to bring this in. Now, since each one of those stories is its own story, they fit within a hierarchy of values, a hierarchy of stories, but each one is its own story. Each story has its own agent and its own arena and its own adventure.
Yeah.
And so there's an agent that is a local agent. It's the agent of that particular story. And it might be a small story with a small dragon. Right? In Antidote to Chaos, his first rules book, right? He points out, he says, look, just like try to do one little thing. All you're going to do, you've got a stack of bills that you haven't looked at. All you're going to do is go look at the stack.
Yep.
You're just going to look at it. That's the first step. Take the step that you actually could take, that you would take. Like he breaks down into the smallest thing, because in that story, am I an agent that can look at the stack of papers?
Yeah.
Because if I'm that agent, then I can then be that agent, which maybe I could actually deal with the stack of papers. Maybe I could actually sort them.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm the person who could open them.
Right.
And determine the priorities. Maybe I'm the person who could go through the priorities, because when you succeed at the local level, that reverberates at each potential agent up from the local to the global. And it happens both ways. Yeah. I don't take responsibility. There's something going on. It's a problem. But I don't see it as my problem. So I don't orient to it as there is something I can do about it. Therefore, I experience barriers and problems rather than stepping stones and opportunities.
Yes.
And if in any area of my life I don't take responsibility, then that agency of the person who's not courageous can also echo up into the global.
Yes.
Does that map onto what you were saying?
Yes. It nestles and feeds back and forth and becomes autopoetic in that sense and self-making. Yes.
Yeah. So, okay, so at the end of, especially at the end of this chapter, he talks about, okay, well, so what happens if you notice the opportunity that exists because responsibility has not been taken?
Yep.
And he talks about, well, that could happen at work. So there's responsibilities that aren't being done work, and you could take those responsibilities, and in so doing, you would become more valuable to the company. Or if you're in a relationship, there might be something that's not happening in the relationship that if you recognize the opportunity, you notice where responsibility is not taken, you take on the responsibility, then you can make the relationship better.
Yep.
And then he's talking about, well, at the mythological level, the ultimate global level of the existential world, right? There's existence and then the stories we tell, and then we live in the existential world.
Yeah.
Now we've got Horus.
Yeah.
And Osiris.
Yeah.
Right? And you could say the ultimate God,
right,
is the God who chooses to see. Not in any particular local thing, although yes, in every local thing, but just as a principle at the highest level, I am someone who takes responsibility to make things better. That to the degree that you choose that meta personality, that meta agent and agency, to the degree that you take responsibility on that level, that cascades down into all of the local things in that auto-poetic way that you're talking about. Because the more you do that, the more, right, in my language, you become an author who tells the story of the agent, right, the author, right? So if it's agent, arena, adventure is a triangle, the tip of the pyramid is the author. And the author tells the story of the agent in the local story as someone courageous who takes responsibility.
Yeah.
And therefore the author interprets the arena and what's happening in terms of what they can do, and they determine the adventure as something that they're moving towards.
Yes. Yes.
Let me find a quote real quick. I know I have it.
Okay.
I have it.
Great.
Okay, great. So from a mythological perspective, if you're really going to be Horus, who gives his other eye to Osiris, right? The willingness to be the hero and the knowledge of tradition. To leverage all the knowledge of tradition and the existing hierarchies, to respect all of the hierarchies of the local to global stories. But if you take this highest thing, he says, you can make this choice. You can say, I'm going to live my life properly. I'm going to aim at the good. I'm going to aim at the highest good I can possibly manage. Right? This ultimate story. I am going to, across all of the local stories, I'm going to aim at the highest good I can possibly manage. Then he says, now, all the parts of you are taking care of your future self. They're on board. Right? You're all aimed in one direction. You're no longer a house divided against yourself. And he says, under such conditions, that is the psychological equivalent of monotheism. That you have one dominant goal, ultimate global goal, the ultimate adventure, the ultimate agent, the ultimate arena. That serves as the pinnacle of the hierarchy, and all of the other values fit into it. All of the other stories fit into this one meta story, the ultimate infinite Piagetian game. Where you're optimizing for yourself and others across time.
Yes. I love that. is this reminding me of that one thing that you told me one time. I think it was we were going for a walk out on the by the water at your old place, and you talked about we were talking about this the sense in which you said I can have an infinite number of perspectives on any point of view, that there's no limit to the amount of different ways I can tell a story or different perspectives I can take on anything, right? So I have a vast amount of choice about that. But then he said this, he says, the one thing I don't have a choice about is that I have a perspective, is that I have a story, that I have a narrative, right? And then you said, the problem though, is that most people have a bunch of different narratives that aren't necessarily connected to each other, nor go very deep. And then you said this thing of, and I remember it just really landed for me. It's like he said, it seems like it's possible, right? It's ideal, and this is what this is pointing to, I believe, is that you can have a story, a narrative that's so deep, right? It's so deep and it's so unified, right? That everything that happens deepens it, right? And then because it's deeper, the more of the ability to open to the world and include more of the world into it, right? It's this interesting place. It's like it seems to me that I'm getting the sense of this is probably this points right at that sweet spot, right? Between chaos and order, right? Like right at the optimal place, because in that sense, on one level, it's ordered. In fact, it's the most ordered. It's singular, right? There's like no division. It's unified. But in that it's unified is precisely, it gives it its ability to open to the multiple. In fact, its unity gives it access to the multiple in such a way that the multiple allows the story to be updated and deepen itself, right? It's this it's like this ultimate, autopoetic verticality, right? This kind of up and down feeding each other in that sweet spot. And it's like and this is one of the things I love about, I've learned a lot about this, and actually, and in terms of leaderships and precisely in teaching courses, because in some level with the course, it's like when you lead a course, at least the way that in the courses I lead, it's a little microcosm, right, of a whole universe. Because if you're leading the course, what that means is that you hold the central story of the course, right? Such that everything that happens to the course as the leader is simply taking that happening and using it as an explication of that fundamental narrative, including like the resistance to it, including the breakdown from it. That your job as a leader isn't this kind of dominating, getting everyone to do, it's actually a kind of flexibility, right? That everything that happens is an opportunity to deepen that story and weave and connect the frames and like continually till everybody in the whole course is just humming, right? With that sense.
Yes. Yes. So one of the words that you taught me, or that you that I experienced through being with you and naming with you, is wonderment.
Yeah.
Right. To take this idea of being in the state of wonder, and to give that a name.
Yeah.
Right? To be the agent
Yeah.
that is experiencing the arena, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
Whether
Yeah.
it matches the plan that you had for the course or not.
Yeah.
To relate to that which is happening with this openness, while still having a fundamental pinnacle of the hierarchy towards which it gets interpreted. It gets interpreted within a story, but there's an infinite number of ways that it can be interpreted. And when I think about wonderment, when I think about Guy Sengstock, right? I think about like going, okay, I'm ready. How is this thing that's happening, how is it going to lead to the place?
Right.
And there's an orientation towards that, a turning towards what's happening in service of, I don't know, the ultimate realization, better, goodness, becoming, empowerment, the will to empower.
Right.
There's something about
Yeah.
the state, and when you were saying that, I was just thinking wonderment. It's like, whatever happens, I'm open to it in a truly creative way. Like, I don't know.
Right.
But there's a pattern that I'm going to allow it and creatively articulate, not knowing, like logos in Jordan's use of the word logos, like creative articulation in service of the highest.
Yes.
That's where I'm headed, but how it shows up, I'm good with.
Yes.
One more step. So I like to say in sexuality. I like to say that there's like 3 levels of sexuality. There's kind of like the pre-rational, which I call fucking. Right? Yep. There's the rational, which I call sex. Or having sex. And then there's the trans-rational that I call making love.
Right.
And fucking it's kind of like role play. Like, you have an idea of what you want it to do, and then you do it, and you're like, yes, I'm doing it. I'm doing the thing I imagined. I'm playing out the role. I am fucking. And it's like, yes, and it's awesome. I love fucking. It's like fantastic. And then there's having sex, which is, let's be present with one another and guide each other towards orgasm or mutual orgasm or wherever we're headed. Consciously and intentionally together, we're going towards this specific thing. We're gonna touch clits in a certain way, or we're going to, whatever it is, we're going to do tantra in a particular way. And then there's making love. And making love is, what am I feeling? What are you feeling? I don't know. I am completely open to what happens. But I'm headed there. I'm headed towards depth and love. And now it's always surprising. It's always a discovery. And therefore it becomes magical in that way. And I'm just present with you, and we're sharing the experience. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know it's headed there.
Yeah. Yes.
Anyway.
Yes.
That's when you were saying that, that's what I was getting.
Yeah, totally. And it's so interesting because there's something about wonder that wonder is, well, a couple of things. It's different than curiosity, right? And John does a lot of work around this about, he distinguishes wonder from curiosity, is that curiosity is about problem solving, right? So if you increase curiosity, at a certain point, it becomes unpleasurable, right? You want curiosity to go away because it's linked to a problem. Where wonder is it's intrinsically nutritious, right? So the increase in wonder, right, is increasingly, you know, amazing, right? Revealing, right? Which I think points to that. It points to where, in some sense, when wonder is in operation, right, is the basis upon which is revealing the world to you, right? It's not something that it's not, wonder isn't really necessarily awe, right? In the sense of I'm seeing something that is so spectacular, right? It's not necessarily that.
That it
But really
deconstructs
wonder,
my sense of reality.
exactly. Wonder is usually where that which has been there the whole time shows itself in this way that I had never seen before, right? So it'd be something like if I leaned against the wall, and I've been living here for like my whole life, and I leaned against the wall, and all of a sudden I just pressed on it accidentally, just the right way, and it was a door that opened. So in this moment, right, there's this present. It's not the discovery of something new, but it's more the revealing of the ground of where you are, right? That when it shows itself as more or less or other than or different than you had not noticed it before, that's that sense of wonder, right? Of that the most ordinary actually is the most extraordinary or the most uncanny or the most mysterious. So there's a sense in which I think what I'm hearing, like as we're talking about it with this, with especially with Peterson's work, you know, how he always talks about like really start at home, clean your room, right? And even with this, there's this kind of sensibility, like that really is not, it's not present in our culture. Nobody's really talking about this, right? In this way of that. No, actually take on dragons that you know that you can conquer. Like start from where you are and deal with the things that are most near to you first. Look around at your life and ask your life basically what's needed, right? And then just start there locally. And that if you do that, there's a sense in which I'm starting to kind of, and it's funny, I've never quite put all this together in the way I think it's coming together right now, in this way of like, to realize, yeah, it's the recognition. I think this is what we've been talking about. It's like the recognition that the ought or the ideal is actually in the is, right? It's like that right here in the way that you clean your room, right? The way that you open to your life in the most ordinary everyday experience of being alive, that there's a way to turn towards it, right? That has it reveal itself as something that leads to everything else, right? That's the wonder, right? I think there's the connection there of just this sense of the most meaningful, all the challenges are right here. They're right here in our own life, in our own cosmos, our own arena. That if we can turn towards them in this different way, and we're, you know, and we're Horus about it, right?
And we're Horus about it.
Yes,
the god Horus. Okay.
Horus, yes. And we cultivate the ability to see, but also the will to see, right? That will can actually reveal your whole life shifting, right? The whole mode of your life shifting by just simply noticing and taking a responsibility for the things that are just right here, right, in your personal life, in your personal relationships, in the most ordinary, that you can be extraordinary, and they can reveal themselves as extraordinary by taking the responsibility and moving towards that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That the adventure, this is the thing I'm getting, is the adventure is actually the thing that's most near. Yeah.
Beautiful. So again, in terms of local and global,
Mm-hmm.
see if this resonates. The way that I turn towards the local, cleaning my phenomenological room, wherever it is that I notice that something hasn't been taken care of. Right. Jordan talks a lot in this, that we have this built-in conscience that looks for that we report on ourselves. Are we on track for that or not? Are we, the more we take responsibility, like we notice that. And in every little thing, if we just focus on what's right there for us to do, that local adventure participates in the higher global ultimate adventure. Right. The ultimate Piagetian game, where I'm optimizing for myself now and into the future, and for the other people now and into the future. That the more that I'm orienting towards that and taking responsibility, that shows up on like right here. Am I going to clean my room? Am I going to be to work on time? Am I going to take responsibility at work? Am I going to take responsibility in my relationships with my body? Like, that's where it shows up. But if we do that aligned with the ultimate Horus, the ultimate logos, where we are saying, I am in wonder towards it. So here's, okay. So if that's, here's the question. So for me, there's this idea of faith. Right. And not like faith, like, do I believe whether or not a book is true in the face of, in the lack of evidence, but when that door opens in the wall, is what's behind that good for me? If I orient towards taking responsibility, and I take responsibility on the local and on the higher and higher, increasingly global levels, should I be in wonder or should I be in horror? Like, if I do that, is it fundamentally good or bad? You know, Ayn Rand, she said that you can either have a benevolent universe premise, or you can have a malevolent universe premise. Like if you bring your best rationality and optimize for your thriving now and across time, and optimize for the thriving of the people that you're connected to, which is perhaps everyone, right? Perhaps the entire world. If you optimize for that over time, if you choose that, if you do that, if you are rational, and if you set that as your pinnacle value, if you take responsibility for that, that what comes from that is good. You know, Jordan says, I decided I'm going to tell the truth as best I can. I'm going to admit my feelings, not like express them. I'm going to admit my feelings. That what comes from that is good. There's something about that, like whatever happens in your course, you know it's going to lead somewhere. Like your job is to interpret whatever's happening such that it's consistent with the highest possible good.
Right.
There's that the orientation. It's like the more I can understand that highest possible good and set that as my adventure and be the agent that is courageously doing that, who's taking responsibility that whatever the arena is, to understand the arena in terms of shifting the arena towards that. That's the turning towards. There's something about it's good.
Yes. And the faith part, we're pointing to something that's like, it's tickling. That it's this, because in so many levels, there's a recognition. I'm thinking about wisdom, right? The sense of the ancient sense of wisdom, in that wisdom is has a lot to do with the ability to protect yourself from self-deception, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's also something that inherently can't be possessed, right? Like so the first sign of the loss of wisdom is if you claim that you're wise, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's Socrates was notorious for this, of continually like saying that he didn't really know anything, right?
And he's the most wise because he realizes that he doesn't know.
Right. And so there's, and it's thinking about this, of like, there's something, and see if we can make this link here. There's something about the necessity of hiddenness that well, okay, good. I mean, maybe a good lead into this is the Karate Kid, right? You remember that, right? Wax on, wax off, right? Sand the floor, right? And we're old enough to not. Down. Yes, exactly. Yes, and Miyagi he's the mentor, right? He's the teacher, and the young kid goes to him wanting to learn how to fight, right? And wants to be trained for this competition. And so Miyagi says, okay, come back at 5 a.m. or whatever. And instead of like practicing karate, he has them stand on the floor, right? Sun up, sun down. And you just basically, the movies, you just see him doing nothing but chores. Then finally, at some point, the kid breaks. And he's like, God, you told me that you would teach me how to do this, and like all you have me do is just like clean your house and da-da-da-da. And then like everything stops, and Miyagi's like, whoa. And then all of a sudden the kid is like, boom, wax on, wax off, right? And it exemplifies something, right? This sense of that, he was training the whole time, right? The whole time, right? But and I want to see if there's a connection here, because the thing I didn't think about it until recently was that it seemed necessary that the kid, it was important to that whole thing that it be concealed, right? There's something being elicited in that it was hidden from him, that what he was actually doing over and over and over again, right? Mm-hmm. What he thought what he was doing, in some sense, it was in some sense deceived, right? But in a different way, right? And that it was necessary for him not to actually understand what he was doing, right, as training, until that moment it was revealed. That hiddenness of that, I'm like, why do we understand, like, what's important, what, like, for in this what's that an example of? Like, why was it important for it to be concealed from him, for it to be the lesson that it was, right? Do you kind of get what I'm getting at here, or what I'm trying to elucidate or point to?
I do. So Jordan Peterson, again, in Antidote to Chaos, he talks about Milton's Paradise Lost and how in that version of Satan or Lucifer,
right,
Lucifer used rationality in a way that closed off possibility because he already knows the answer.
Yeah,
he already knows the answer. And as soon as he does that, he gets locked into an ideological position and he misses the information that it's not that it's wrong. Like, I like to hold up the pen and say it's a cylinder and it's blue and it's plastic and it's under a pound, right?
Yeah.
When Karate Kid when he's doing his thing.
Yeah.
Right. And this might actually get back to Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Right? Jordan Peterson is saying there's something hidden in the stories that can't be simplified.
Yeah.
It can't be. Why? Because if you attempt to simplify it, your language and your best rational attempt to speak it will only be part of the story. And if you get fooled into thinking that the thing that you're saying is the whole story, then you become arrogant. So how I'm making sense of this is like, why didn't Miyagi just say, hey, look, here's a block. One block is you go up like this.
Yeah.
And the other block is you go down like this. And then there's a block where you go like this and a block like this, right? Yeah. And then there's a block, right? So do this exercise. Go like this over and like go like this. So that you can practice moving up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And do this exercise so that you can do this thing. And I think the reason why it needed to be hidden.
Yeah.
Let's say two reasons. One, like a straightforward reason, one, a meta reason. If I'm just doing the sanding, or if I'm just waxing on and waxing off, or I'm just painting up and down, then I tap into my body's full intelligence about how to do that move elegantly with the minimum amount of movement so I can be as efficient as possible, that if I do it just feeling the motion that happens, I'm in contact with the fence, I'm in contact with the car. And that thing is teaching me everything about the movement.
Yeah.
Whereas if I were focused on trying to learn the movement as a block, I would project onto my muscles a predetermined and therefore ineffective way of moving. And so I would limit myself. So there's something about putting yourself in a hidden, if it's hidden, then you call on your intuition and you bring in all of your intelligence rather than just your rational intelligence.
Right.
And that's why Jordan Peterson teaches myth and story. Because when you teach the story, it brings in all of the elements of the story, where when you try to bring it down into the principle, you focus on just little parts of it and you miss the, I don't know. It's like, why does it need to be hidden?
Yeah.
Does it need to be hidden?
Right.
Why didn't Miyagi just teach him?
Yeah.
It was never clear. It was never stated in the movie, here's why I did it this way.
However, the fact that it grips us, right? That moment grips us. We understand something that we may not be able to explain, but in that being gripped and inspired and struck and awestruck by that, right? Tells us that it's tuning into something that we do understand. We may not know what we understand. And I think I think we're teasing it out a bit of that there is this relationship Yes, yes. It's like you don't need wondrous events in order to have and cultivate a deep sense of wonder, right?
Mhm.
That it's a mode of being in the world that that that's somehow in relationship. It's able to be in relationship with the unseen, right?
Mhm.
And I think that yes, and that relationship with the unseen is the ultimate mentor, right? Like, as I think probably you would say, is like the ultimate other, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
This, because there is this quality, I've noticed this in my own life, that although I've made goals and articulated and done a lot of work on like writing them out and being accountable for them and all that kind of stuff along the way, there's this way where I have this sense where I actually end up, 10 years later, I look back and I realize, like, oh, this is what I've been doing. This is what I really wanted, right? And it was obvious but undistinct that whole time. So that in some sense, there's the goals, the telos that we understand, that we can see, but then there's something that's beyond the horizon, right? That draws us near, that on some level has been the thing that I had to become someone who could see it, right? So the process of moving towards that, right, revealed itself over time. And then I realized, like, oh, without even knowing it, like this is what, right, I was actually doing in circling. This is actually why I became a coach. Oh, this is what I was interested in, right? This is
Mhm.
was actually the thing that I actually wanted. And at the time, I just didn't have the information or the know-how or the ability to understand, but that there was something that I was responding to that revealed itself over time, right? So there's this kind of quality about what, like wonderment and a relationship of faith to, like, that domain of the unseen, right, and the unsayable, right, and the mystery that that ultimately I can't grasp, I can't possess in some way, but I can be in service of it and I can be oriented towards it, right? And it can hone me and it can reveal itself over time, right? But ultimately
In
is
increasing
is the
approximation.
unknown. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Like, where are we headed?
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't possibly know. I haven't, like, I'm going into
Yeah.
territory I haven't been there yet. I don't know what the territory is. I can imagine the territory, but the best I can do is project everything I know onto the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And reality, like we always say, it's like there's reality and then there's my version of how I think it should be,
Yeah.
right? Reality in all of its depth, and then my,
Mm,
in
right.
comparison, paltry understanding of how it could be.
Yeah.
And when
Yeah.
those things are out of sync, like, probably make your paltry understanding wrong. Not reality wrong, but like most people, when
Yeah.
when reality is different than their understanding, they make reality wrong.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
reality, they fight
Yes.
against
Yeah.
reality rather than embracing it. But if
Right.
you can
Right.
say yes to reality with this benevolent faith,
Yeah.
a sense for its
Yeah.
benevolence, that
Mm,
if I follow
mm,
the meaning, the sense of responsibility that I can see when I look into my phenomenological space and I see something that needs to be cleaned, and it's a small dragon, but I can clean it. I can, and it calls to me. Whatever that interest is, whatever it is that has me say, I notice
interest.
that.
Yeah.
Whatever that interest is, I can trust it.
Right.
I can trust that if I follow that with the intention of being good.
Yeah.
The natural constraints of reality, which are that if I eat poison, I die. Right? If I eat too much heroin, it's going to be fantastic for 5 minutes and then I die. Right? The constraints of reality are that I have to make choices that have me survive through time.
Yeah.
And that if I want to optimize across all of my selves across time, that set of constraints.
Yep.
Is good.
Yeah.
that I need to have my relationships such that what I do right now makes my relationships good, but it also makes my relationships better through time.
Yeah.
And preferably, right, and this is one of my favorite. This is one of my favorite things, and I attribute this to Ayn Rand. It's like when someone else does something good.
Yeah.
When someone else builds something, creates art, takes responsibility. When someone else does that, my life is better.
Yeah.
Whenever someone else creates something cool, my life is better. And therefore, I want to support people creating great things. So I want other people to succeed. I want other people's lives to work. And those constraints, what's good for me versus what's bad for me, what's good for me across time versus what's bad for me across time, what's good for other people now and across time, those constraints, I don't get to choose.
Yeah.
And that gets selected for, and the character that deals with those constraints optimally becomes the hero.
Yep.
In the stories. And that character becomes admirable.
Right.
So that the more I'm that character, the more admiration I get, the more attractive I'm going to be.
Yes.
And all of those constraints, the is creates the ought. I ought to do that. Why? Because, and that's the Piagetian insight that he calls back again and again. It's like, like if you want to have a good life, what is a good life? What is the self? He asks again, like, let's say you're going to be completely selfish. And again, Ayn Rand is like blinking in my mind throughout the entire thing. Let's say that you're going to be really selfish. Well, if you're going to be really selfish, then you have to consider yourself across time.
Yeah.
And you have to consider who you're relating with and how you're relating with them in such a way that you're building the kind of relationships that you want to inherit, that you're working with people who are creative and faith in that, even though it's hidden. It in fact cannot be known. You cannot know what that is. And even once you get there, you only know so much. There's an infinity for something about that unknown infinity.
Inexhaustibility. Yeah.
Inexhaustibility. Again, object-oriented, right?
Right.
Ontology. Just the inexhaustibility of that goodness. But and again, Vervaeke talks about terror.
Yeah.
It's like it could be that your entire hierarchy falls apart. Jordan in Maps of Meaning, he talks about inconveniences and catastrophes.
Yep.
Like if you're trying to get someplace and the street is closed and you go around, it's an inconvenience.
Yep.
If you're trying to get someplace and you discover that your family has been killed in a car crash, that changes your whole life. That's a catastrophe.
Yep.
That's horror.
Yep.
When the door in the wall opens and leads to hell versus leads to, there's something about that faith. And it's like, it's a good word. It's been contaminated by religion, I think, but there's something about that faith. In that if you pursue good for self across time, good for others across time, and optimize for that.
Yeah.
If you take on the responsibility as that agent towards that adventure and understand everything in the arena as that which you are doing that with.
Yeah.
There's something about that which is good.
Well, yeah. And I think what does become seeable and known is in that notion of suchness, right? Of that sense in which it's like, so my wife who's pregnant, as she becomes more pregnant, right? We have a little mystery, right? Growing in her womb, and she's revealing herself as more and more of a mystery, right? And it's really true. It's like, it's really true. I was like, we were out to dinner last night. She's just a way that she just was being goofy and responded. And I like looked at her and I was just like, you never stop fundamentally surprising me. Right. And it was so interesting because I was looking at her, the pinks of her cheeks and her eyeball and her blue cap going off to the left a little bit. And there's this level of where like the mystery, the inexhaustibility, right? The unattainableness of it showed itself in the particular like glimmer in her eye, in the particular way her face looked in this direction, right? There was a suchness to it, right? That pointed to beyond itself, yet it was glowed, right? The sense of moreness glowed through the suchness in the particular. So there is this kind of way where it's not just about, and this is like the heart of something very like very mysterious to me, like, but it's that, it's the mystery as such, right? That as you develop and deepen your lived faith in the good, right? And you move towards that horizon, right? And things, your life your life starts to gather itself, right? In a way that shows like a pattern, right? That where things just start to come together that are, ultimately it's unsayable. But the sense in which there's something here about beauty. There's something here about that mystery, that the unsayable kind of gathers itself up in the particulars that show itself as a kind of as a beauty, right? As a something you can be in rapture of. But it's in the particulars, right? And it's in the particulars of the people's faces, the way that you set your house up, how you respond to particular things, the nuances, what you hear yourself saying that you didn't know that you knew, that come together in that way, the way people respond. That there is a way where it's not just inaccessible. It's a mystery that's present. It's like the presence of what's present. Yes.
Right. The present moment is always particular.
Yeah.
Right. One of my teachers always taught me. He said, "Nothing ever happens in general."
Yeah.
Right. It always happens in particular.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Right. Another way I like to say that is that spirit always manifests in a form, in a particular form.
Yeah.
It always manifests in a particular form. That the ultimate story, the highest thing is potential that must manifest in the redness of her cheeks and the glint in her eyes and the crookedness of her, like,
Yeah.
that's how it shows up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, like, again, coming back to my lived experience.
Yeah.
Right now, Bree is going through pregnancy.
Yeah.
And because there's the story of pregnancy, like everything that she's experiencing takes on a particular, like it lives within that higher story, but it all happens specifically.
Yes. Yes.
So as you know, Min, my wife, she has a variety of health issues, chronic pain and stuff. And she's going through some hell right now. It's just hellish. And like if she were pregnant, it wouldn't be hell. Like everything that was happening would be happening in a larger story.
Yeah.
But like what's happening is we don't know. We don't have a larger story. And the question is, like, I am, like, it's happening. And the question is, what is the story I'm going to tell to make sense of it? Like you look back on your past and you go, oh, that led to that, led to that. And of course I was doing all of that. And now I'm here. And everything makes sense in terms of getting me here.
Yeah.
But that's a construction. Like that story is a construction. And something about wisdom, you know, John Vervaeke just like, it's such a funny term because it's relevance, realization. Right? What do you realize? That something's relevant, but like what's relevant? How do you realize the relevance when relevance is the realization? But whatever that is, that's what it is.
Yeah. And also notice the word reveal. Right? Reveal. It's the same. It's so interesting. Even the word just gets right in that place of the disclosure in some way is also the same word indicates a clothing, right? An unclothing, a clothing. Reveal has a double meaning there. So this is.
Yes. And to realize, to make real. On the one hand, it's a discovery. Everything is memory.
Yeah.
On the other hand, every understanding is a creative act.
Right.
Like I am creating the frame in which to interpret the thing that gets revealed.
Yeah.
It's like when the thing happens in your course, what does it mean that it happened? Well, you already have a frame. And then you creatively, like it's an act of creation. It's something you're brilliant at, that you get to go, oh, do you see that thing that just happened? Here, let me explicate how that is exactly the example we need in order to show the thing.
Yeah.
And that relevance, revealing, and realizing, creating, Jason Alexander, my mentor, it's like to appreciate art is an act of artistry. It is fundamentally an act of creativity to find something beautiful. But if you choose to find it beautiful versus ugly, like I can look back on my past and just find all of the things that went wrong and feel shame and guilt and hell. Or I can aim towards heaven and beauty.
Right.
And to realize that heaven is the thing. Like heaven is the thing that is relevant.
Yes.
One more thing,
Yes.
beauty. So differentiating, what does it mean for something to be beautiful versus pretty?
Mhm. Yeah.
Like pretty is, it matches the ideal in some kind of perfection kind of thing, but beauty is, it's the head is sideways and the glint in the eye and you've got the one hair that's sticking out, and like beauty contains pain.
Yeah.
It's the entire story. It's like,
Yeah.
for something to be beautiful, it must be deep, and deep means that it contains all of the pain and the suffering.
Yes.
There's something about, on the one hand, I'm aiming for beauty, and on the other hand, I'm embracing everything that happens and telling the story in such a way that it becomes part of the story of beauty.
Yeah. Yeah.
That orienting, that turning towards, that taking of responsibility to what? To, I say to interpret, to tell the story of heaven, to tell a heroic story, a story with heroic meaning. And the story of heroic meaning is, I confront Set, the evil brother.
Right. Right.
Unapologetic. I do not pretend that Set is not Set, that he's not evil. But in confronting him, I take the loss of my eye and I give it to tradition, so that I can bring aliveness to tradition, that I make that choice. That is heroic, to head for beauty in the face, like to tell a heavenly story in the face of hellish circumstances.
Yeah.
And
Let me see if this is kind of what we're talking about here. Because there's something about, let's just say I'm at a point in my life and I'm contemplating to open up to the possibility of a relationship, or the possibility of something that's deeply meaningful to me, right? Mm-hmm. It's interesting because there's something about, the problem though is that if in opening up to that, I simultaneously open up to the possibility of not that. And I think it's like, there's this kind of level of like, this goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning. If I'm a no, or I am a contraction, right? Or I'm not open to the possibility of not having it, right? I have a feeling, as to the degree that I think it's the same horizon, right? Like if I'm closed to the possibility of failure. I simultaneously close to the possibility of success, right? That there's something about this, maybe what's beautiful is the courage to open up to the whole thing, right? That there's like, if I close a little bit if I close up to the possibility of not having what I want, right? I simultaneously, I think I close, it's the same horizon to the possibility of having it, right? That there's something about the way that we participate that embraces both of those, right? Embraces both of those.
To bring that global principle down into the most tangible local place for me, because the place that I experience that the most is with my wife. Right? It's like every time that I open to share some part of myself that is vulnerable, I'm open to the fact that she might not be able to handle it. Right? Like I might say, here's this, and she might bobble it and drop it and break it. She might go, ooh, that's ugly.
Yeah.
And it's my willingness to risk that.
Yes.
To embrace either she says yes or no as part of a larger movement towards the higher story above that local circumstance. I'm willing for that local story to fail because the courage of being willing for it to fail, but to still do it opens up this larger space where I can go beyond what I know into that.
Right.
Into that unknown.
Yeah. Yes. There's like a disciplined unconditionality there.
So notice that opportunity, right, lives where responsibility has been abdicated.
Yeah. There we go. All right.
If I can take responsibility to embrace the possibility of yes and the possibility of no.
Yeah.
Then I'm not naive.
Right.
I'm not trusting out of naivete. I'm trusting in the face of the knowledge that I can be betrayed.
Yep.
I'm aiming for the goal in the face of obstacles that might stop me. And those obstacles might be external, or they might be my own lack of skill or empowerment or whatever. My capacities might be lacking. But I'm willing.
Yes.
I'm willing to see, even if what I'm seeing is set.
Yes. Right.
And to the degree that I'm unwilling to see that responsibility is being abdicated, then Osiris gets taken over by Set.
Yes. Right.
And I might win and I might lose this local game, but I win the overall game of becoming the kind of person who is on that path. No matter what happens, I'm on that path, and therefore everything fits into that story.
Right.
And
that's why the I, culminates under the layers and layers and layers and layers of wisdom and tradition and procedures, and that it's actually like that freedom that it lifts up from it, right? And is able to then see it, right? And then notice dissonances and respond to places where it's corrupt or it's been abdicated or growing old and respond, right? It's like, yes, it's that sense of like authorship you talked about. This authorship is, it's like in some sense reading the book so deeply, right? So deeply, like in studying it and reading it so deeply to where you're like thinking, right? You're waking up the author from its grave from being seen so deeply, right? To then at some point you turn the next page and it's you finding yourself writing the next chapter, right? Mm-hmm. There's this kind of quality of like this kind of this, I'm appreciating how beautiful and deep this is, right? Of opening up to this, right? Yeah. To what's here. Mm-hmm.
And whatever happens, that's exactly what needed to happen in order for it to become the thing.
Yeah.
The highest possible good.
Yeah, totally.
Amen, brother.
And no matter what happens, I love you.
Love you, bye. This brings us to the end of this episode of Chaos, Logos, Order, where we apply the ideas of Jordan Peterson in order to create lives of increasingly heroic meaning. With our hosts, Guy Sengstock of thecirclinginstitute.com and Mark Michael Lewis from the game of heroicmeaning.com. We're going through Jordan Peterson's new book, Beyond Order, chapter by chapter. In this episode, we went through chapter 4, Notice that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. If you found this helpful and you want more, join us in our next episode as we go through chapter 5, Do Not Do What You Hate. And as always, we leave you with a challenge. Make your deepest happiness your highest priority.